The small bell above the door jingled for the 100th time that day. David looked up from counting change behind the counter of his little corner store. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, which meant school had just ended. Soon, his store would fill with kids looking for snacks and drinks. David had been running this store for 15 long years. He knew every crack in the sidewalk outside, every squeaky floorboard inside, and the exact time each regular customer would walk through his door. The store wasn't fancy. The paint was peeling in some corners, and the old freezer in the back made funny noises. But it was his, and he took pride in keeping it clean and welcoming. The first wave of children burst through the door like a colorful tornado. Tommy rushed straight to the soda cooler. Lisa headed for the chips. The Johnson twins argued over which candy bar was better. David smiled as he watched them. These kids had grown up coming to his store. He remembered when they were barely tall enough to see over the counter. "Mr. David, can I get this?" Tommy held up an energy drink, his backpack still hanging off one shoulder. "You know your mom doesn't want you drinking those," David replied with a gentle but firm voice. "How about a regular soda instead?" Tommy made a face but grabbed a cola. David had this conversation with him at least twice a week. The boy never gave up trying, and David never gave up looking out for him. As the crowd of kids made their purchases and headed home, David noticed someone lingering by the candy section. A small girl stood there quietly, her fingers tracing the colorful packages. She looked about 8 years old with very pale skin and the biggest, darkest eyes he had ever seen. There was something unusual about her, though he couldn't put his finger on what it was. The girl didn't grab items like the other kids. She didn't call out to friends or make noise. She just stood there, looking at the candies with such longing that it made David's heart ache. He had seen this look before on children whose families didn't have much money. "Looking for something special?" David asked, walking around the counter to where she stood. The girl looked up at him. Her eyes seemed much older than her face. "I was just looking," she said in a voice that was surprisingly mature. "Thank you for asking." David noticed she didn't have any money in her hands. Her clothes were clean but simple. Everything about her seemed different from the other neighborhood. Kids, but not in a bad way. She was just unusual. "What's your favorite kind of candy?" David asked. The girl's eyes lit up slightly. "I like chocolate," she said, "but I also think gummy bears are wonderful, and those colorful lollipops look like tiny rainbows." Something about the way she spoke made David think of his own daughter, who lived far away with her mother. He missed giving his little girl treats and seeing her face light up. Maybe that's why he did what he did next. "Here," David said, reaching for a chocolate bar from the shelf. "This one's really good. My treat." The girl stared at the candy bar, then at David as if she couldn't believe what was happening. "Really? For me?" "Of course," David smiled. "Everyone deserves something sweet sometimes." The girl took the candy bar with both hands, holding it like it was made of gold. "Thank you so much," she said, and David had never heard anyone sound so genuinely grateful. "This is very kind of you." "What's your name?" David asked. "People call me Luna," the girl replied. "What should I call you?" "Mr. David works just fine," he said. "Do you live around here?" Luna nodded. "Not too far. I walk by here every day after school." "Well, you're welcome any time," David said, "even if you just want to look around." The next day, Luna appeared again. This time, David was ready. He had set aside a small pack of gummy bears. When he saw her looking at the candy section, he walked over and handed them to her. "Thank you, Mr. David," Luna said with that same sincere gratitude. "You are very generous." This became their daily routine. Every weekday after the rush of other kids had come and gone, Luna would appear. She never asked for anything, never demanded treats like some children might. She would simply look at the candies with wonder, and David would choose something different each day to give her. Sometimes it was a chocolate bar, Other days, gummy bears or a lollipop. Once, he gave her a small bag of mixed candies, and she smiled so brightly that it made his entire week better. Luna was different from other kids in many ways. She never ran or made noise. She always said please and thank you. She seemed to really listen when adults spoke to her. Other children her age would grab their candy and rush out to play, but Luna would stay for a few minutes, asking David about his day or telling him about something interesting she had learned in school. Did you know that some stars are so far away that their light takes millions of years to reach us? Luna said one afternoon, carefully unwrapping a chocolate bar. I did not know that, David replied, though he actually did. That's pretty amazing. It means when we look at stars, we're seeing the past, Luna continued. Maybe some of those stars don't even exist anymore, but we still see their light. David was impressed. Most 8-year-olds he knew were more interested in cartoons than astronomy. Luna was special, and not just because of her unusual appearance or mature way of speaking. She had a kindness about her, a gentleness that reminded him that good things still existed in the world. For 3 years, this routine continued. Luna would come by every school day, David would give her a small treat, and they would chat for a few minutes. She never brought friends, never mentioned much about her family, but she became a bright spot in David's day. Then, one Tuesday in spring, Luna didn't come. David waited, watching the door, but she never appeared. Wednesday came and went. Then Thursday. By Friday, David was worried. Had something happened to her family? Had they moved away? Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Luna never returned. David would catch himself setting aside a piece of candy for her, then remembering that she wasn't coming back. He missed their conversations and her genuine smile. Years passed, and David gradually stopped thinking about Luna every day. But sometimes, when he saw the evening light hitting the candy display just right, he would remember the little girl with the old eyes and the sweet smile who had brightened his days with nothing more than her presence and gratitude. 25 years had passed since Luna disappeared from David's life. His once dark hair was now completely gray, and his back ached every morning when he got out of bed. The store looked different, too. New paint covered the old cracks, and modern coolers had replaced the noisy old ones. But David was still there, still behind the same counter, still serving the neighborhood. His nephew Carlos now officially owned the store, but David couldn't imagine spending his days anywhere else. This little corner shop had been his whole world for so long. Even though he was 63 years old, he came in every morning at 7 and stayed until closing time. It was a quiet Tuesday evening in October. The after-school rush was long, over, and David was doing his end-of-day counting. He had maybe 30 minutes before he would flip the closed sign and head home to his small apartment upstairs. The store was empty except for him, and he could hear the soft humming of the refrigerators and the tick of the old clock on the wall. That's when the door chime rang. David looked up from his calculator, expecting to see one of his regular evening customers. Maybe old Mrs. Chen coming for her nightly bottle of milk, or perhaps Jake from down the street grabbing a late snack. Instead, he saw someone who made him stop breathing for a moment. A woman stood in the doorway, and she was absolutely stunning. She had long, platinum blonde hair that seemed to shine under the store's lights. Her skin was perfectly smooth and pale, like expensive porcelain. She wore clothes that looked both elegant and timeless, not the kind of outfit people usually wore to corner stores. But it was her eyes that made David's heart skip a beat. They were large and dark, and there was something strangely familiar about them. The woman didn't browse the aisles like normal customers. She didn't head for the milk or grab a bag of chips. Instead, she walked straight toward the counter where David stood. Her movements were graceful, almost like she was floating rather than walking. Everything about her seemed otherworldly. David cleared his throat and tried to act normal. "Good evening, miss. How can I help you? The woman stopped right in front of the counter and studied his face carefully. She tilted her head slightly to one side, and something about that gesture sent a chill down David's spine. He had seen that head tilt before, but he couldn't remember where. "Hello, David," she said softly. David blinked in surprise. "Do we know each other? I'm sorry, but I don't think we've met before." The woman smiled, and her smile was both beautiful and sad at the same time. "We have met," she said, "though it was a very long time ago. You look older, but your eyes are exactly the same. Kind eyes." David tried to think of where he might have met this woman. She looked to be in her early 30s, maybe 35 at most. 25 years ago, she would have been just a child. He had met thousands of people over the years through his store. Customers grew up, moved away, changed. It was hard to keep track of everyone. "I'm sorry," David said again, adjusting his reading glasses. "Could you help me remember?" The woman reached into her purse, an expensive-looking bag that probably cost more than David made in a month. She pulled out something that made David's knees feel weak. It was an old, faded candy wrapper, a chocolate bar wrapper, worn and carefully preserved. "Do you remember giving candy to a little girl?" the woman asked, holding up the wrapper. "Every day after school, for 3 years? You never asked for money. You never asked questions. You just smiled and said, 'Have a good day,' with such genuine kindness." David stared at the wrapper, then at the woman's face. His mind started racing through memories from decades ago. A quiet, little girl with pale skin and unusual eyes. A child who spoke like an adult and wondered about stars. Someone who appeared every day and then vanished without explanation. "Luna?" he whispered, barely believing his own voice. The woman's smile grew wider, and suddenly David could see the child she had been. The same grateful expression, the same tilt of the head, the same mysterious depth in her dark eyes. "You remember?" she said, and her voice carried the same formal tone he remembered from long ago. David felt like the world was spinning. "But that's impossible. Luna was 8 years old when she stopped coming here. That was 25 years ago. You should be maybe 33 now, not—" He paused, looking at the woman in front of him. "You look exactly the right age. But how is that possible? And how did you preserve that wrapper for so long?" Luna, because it really was Luna, David was somehow certain of that now, carefully placed the wrapper back in her purse. "That's a very good question," she said, "and the answer might be hard for you to believe." David leaned against the counter for support. His heart was beating so fast, he worried he might have a heart attack right there in his own store. "I don't understand any of this. You disappeared for 25 years. Where have you been? What happened to you? And why do you look exactly the age you should look if time had passed normally?" Luna looked around the store, taking in all the changes that had happened over the years. "You've kept this place beautiful," she said. "It feels like home." "Luna," David said more firmly, "please tell me what's going on. I've wondered about you for decades. I worried that something terrible had happened to you and your family." Luna's expression grew serious. "Nothing terrible happened, David. But my story is complicated. Can we sit down? What I need to tell you might take a while, and I think you should be sitting when you hear it." David's hands were shaking as he flipped the sign on the door to closed and turned the lock. Whatever Luna was about to tell him, he had. A feeling his quiet life was about to become very interesting. David's hands were still trembling as he pulled 2 chairs from the back room. His mind was racing with 1,000 questions, but he couldn't form the words to ask any of them. Luna sat down gracefully, folding her hands in her lap the same way she used to do as a child. "I know this must be confusing," Luna began, her voice gentle but serious. 25 years is a long time for humans. A lot changes. People grow old, have families, build lives. But for some of us, time works differently." David sat across from her, studying her face in the dim store lighting. Every detail confirmed what his heart already knew. This was the same Luna who had brightened his days decades ago. But his logical mind kept fighting against the impossible truth. "What do you mean, some of us?" David asked carefully. "Luna, you look exactly the age you should look if you had grown up normally. But the way you're talking, it sounds like something else is going on." Luna smiled sadly. "You always were observant, David. Even when I was little, you noticed things other adults missed. Do you remember asking me once why I never brought friends to your store?" David nodded slowly. He remembered lots of things about Luna now that she was sitting in front of him, how she never ran or played like other children, how she spoke with perfect grammar, how she seemed to understand things that were too complex for an 8-year-old. "You told me you preferred quiet places," David recalled, "but I always wondered if there was more to it." "There was," Luna said. "David, I need to tell you something. That might sound crazy. I need you to listen with an open mind, okay?" David's stomach tightened. "I'm listening." Luna took a deep breath. "I'm not entirely human. I'm part of a small group of people who are different. We live much longer than regular humans. We age differently. What you saw as an 8-year-old child was really someone much older, just in a different stage of development." David stared at her. "I don't understand." "Think of it like this," Luna explained patiently. "You know how some trees live for hundreds of years, but they grow very slowly? Or how some animals live much longer than others? My people are similar. We might look like children for decades, then suddenly change and look like adults. Time moves differently for us." David felt dizzy. "Are you saying you weren't really a child when you came to my store?" "I was a child in terms of my development," Luna said. "But I had already been alive for much longer than 8 human years. In your terms, I was probably the equivalent of someone in their 20s. That's why I spoke the way I did, why I was interested in things like astronomy." David rubbed his temples. This was too much to process. "So you're telling me you're some kind of... what? Different species?" "Something like that," Luna said softly. "We've lived alongside humans for thousands of years. Most humans never know we exist. We look like you. We live among you. But we're just different. Longer lives, different aging patterns, different abilities sometimes." David thought about all those afternoons when Luna would tell him fascinating facts about science or ask thoughtful questions about life. Things that had seemed unusual for a child her age. But he had just assumed she was very smart. "Why are you telling me this now?" David asked. "After all these years of keeping it secret?" Luna's eyes filled with emotion. "Because you were kind to me when you thought I was just a poor child who couldn't afford candy. You never expected anything in return. You just gave, day after day, because you have a good heart. In all my long life, across all the places I've been, that kind of pure kindness is rare." David felt tears forming in his eyes. "I just saw a little girl who wanted something sweet. It wasn't anything special." "But it was special," Luna insisted. "You don't understand how special. Most humans, when they show kindness, it's because they expect something back, or because it makes them feel good about themselves. But you gave me candy and asked for nothing. You didn't even know my real name or where I lived. You just cared about a child's happiness." David wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "Where did you go? Why did you disappear so suddenly?" Luna looked down at her. "Hands. My family had to move. It's something we do every few decades to avoid questions about why we don't age normally. We were getting too settled here, and some neighbors were starting to notice unusual things. It broke my heart to leave without saying goodbye to you." "I looked for you," David admitted. I worried something bad had happened. I know, Luna said. I wanted to come back and explain, but I was young and scared. My family thought it was better to make a clean break. But I never forgot you, David. I kept that candy wrapper all these years because it reminded me that genuine goodness exists in the world. David leaned back in his chair, trying to absorb everything Luna had told him. So what happens now? Are you going to disappear again? Luna shook her head. I'm old enough now to make my own choices. I came back because I wanted to thank you properly, and because I wanted you to know that your kindness changed my life in ways you can't imagine. How did it change your life? Luna smiled, and for a moment, David could see the wonder-filled child she had been. That's a story for tomorrow, if you're willing to hear it. But David, what I can tell you now is that a simple candy bar given with love can change the entire course of someone's existence. David sat in his quiet store, looking at this incredible woman who had once been his favorite little customer, and realized that his ordinary life had just become extraordinary. The next morning, David could barely concentrate on his usual routine. He kept replaying the conversation with Luna in his mind, wondering if it had all been some strange dream. But when he touched the business card she had left on the counter before disappearing into the night, he knew it was real. The card was made of thick, expensive paper and simply read, Luna Sterling with a phone number. At exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the same time she used to visit as a child, Luna walked through his door again. This time she carried a small leather bag and wore a simple blue dress that somehow looked both modern and timeless. I brought something to show you, Luna said, setting the bag carefully on the counter. Things that might help you understand my story better. David watched as Luna opened the bag and pulled out several items. First was a photograph that looked very old, maybe from the 1800s. It showed a group of people in old-fashioned clothes, and David's jaw dropped when he recognized a younger-looking Luna among them. That's me in 1887, Luna said casually. I was living in Boston then, working as a teacher. I looked about 25 years old, just like I do now. David picked up the photograph with shaking hands. This is impossible. People don't live for over 100 years looking the same age. Regular humans don't, Luna agreed. But my people do. We have lifespans that can stretch for centuries. We age very slowly, and we stay in our prime for a very long time. The next item Luna pulled out was a newspaper clipping from 1923, Monsieur. Headline read, Local Woman Helps Build New Hospital. The accompanying photo showed Luna cutting a ribbon at what appeared to be a hospital opening ceremony. Chicago, Luna explained. I spent 30 years there helping to establish medical facilities. I've always been drawn to helping people. David studied the newspaper clipping. Luna looked identical to how she appeared now. How many places have you lived? Dozens, Luna said. We move around every few decades to avoid suspicion. It's not safe for humans to know too much about us. Throughout history, people have feared what they don't understand. Luna pulled out more items from her bag. A letter of recommendation from 1945, praising her work with war refugees. A certificate from 1967, showing she had graduated from a university in California. A business license from 1981, when she had opened a small clinic in Oregon. Every few decades, I create a new identity, Luna explained. New papers, new background, new life. But the same mission. David looked through all the documents, his amazement growing with each piece of evidence. What mission? Luna sat down across from him, her expression growing serious. David, do you remember what you taught me about kindness? How you gave me candy every day without expecting anything in return? David nodded, still overwhelmed by everything he was seeing. That lesson changed everything for me, Luna continued. Before I met you, I lived only for myself and my immediate family. We were taught to stay hidden, to avoid forming connections with humans. But you showed me something different. What do you mean? You showed me that small acts of kindness can brighten someone's entire day, Luna said. You made me realize that if I was going to live for centuries, I could either spend that time hiding from the world or I could use my long life to make a difference. David felt his heart racing. So, what did you do? Luna smiled. I started small, just like you did. In Boston, I helped families who couldn't afford medical care. In Chicago, I worked to build hospitals in poor neighborhoods. During World War II, I helped refugees find safe places to live. She pulled out a modern tablet from her bag and showed David a website. This is my current project, Sterling Foundation. We build schools, fund medical research, and provide clean water to communities that need it. David stared at the screen. The website showed projects all over the world. Schools in Africa, hospitals in South America, clean water systems in Asia. The foundation had clearly helped millions of people. You did all this? David asked. With the help of many good people? Yes, Luna said. But David, none of it would have happened without you. When I was a child, or what appeared to be a child, you were the first person to show me unconditional kindness. You taught me that caring for others wasn't about what you could get back from them. David felt tears forming in his eyes again. I just gave you candy bars. You gave me hope, Luna corrected. You gave me a reason to believe that humans were worth caring about. Every school I've built, every hospital I've funded, every person I've helped, it all started with an old man in a corner store who gave free candy to a strange little girl. Luna reached across the counter and took David's weathered hand in her smooth one. Do you understand now why I had to come back? Why I had to tell you what your simple kindness created? David was crying now, unable to hold back the emotion. I had no idea. I thought I was just being nice to a kid. That's exactly why it mattered so much, Luna said gently. You weren't trying to change the world. You were just trying to make one little girl smile. But sometimes, David, that's exactly how the world gets changed. One small kindness at a time. David looked around his simple store, then back at the evidence of all the incredible things Luna had accomplished. For the first time in his life, he truly understood that every act of kindness, no matter how small, ripples outward in ways we can never imagine. David spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling of his small apartment above the store. Everything Luna had shown him kept playing through his mind like a movie. The photographs, the newspaper clippings, the foundation website, it was all real. His simple act of giving candy to a child had somehow sparked a lifetime of helping others. The next afternoon, Luna returned with something different in her eyes. There was a sadness there that David hadn't seen before. I need to tell you something. Difficult, Luna said, settling into the chair across from David. My people don't usually reveal themselves to humans. When we do, it means we're preparing to move on. David felt his heart sink. You're leaving again? Not right away, Luna said quickly. But eventually, yes. It's safer for everyone if humans don't know too much about us for too long. Throughout history, when people have discovered our existence, it hasn't ended well for either side. David understood, but it still hurt. How long do we have? A few weeks, maybe a month, Luna said. But before I go, I wanted to give you something, not as payment for the candy. That debt could never be repaid. But as a way to continue the circle of kindness you started. Luna pulled out an envelope and placed it on the counter between them. David, you've worked in this store for 40 years. You've served this community, helped countless families, given joy to thousands of children. Don't you think you deserve to rest? David picked up the envelope hesitantly. What is this? Open it, Luna said with a gentle smile. Inside was a check. David had to count the zeros twice before he believed what he was seeing. It was enough money to retire comfortably, buy a nice house, travel if he wanted to, never worry about bills. Again! Luna, I can't take this, David said, his voice shaking. This is too much. It's not nearly enough, Luna replied. David, do you know how much money my foundation has raised over the decades? Hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you know how many lives we've saved? How many children we've educated? How many communities we've helped? David shook his head, still staring at the check. All of that started with your kindness, Luna continued. Every dollar raised, every life saved, every child educated, it all traces back to an old man who gave free candy to a strange little girl. This money isn't a gift, David. It's your share of everything we've accomplished together. David felt tears streaming down his cheeks. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Luna said, but I do have a request. Anything, David whispered. Don't just retire and disappear, Luna said. Use some of this money to keep the circle going. Find ways to help others, just like you helped. Me. Show other people what real kindness looks like. David looked around his store, then back at Luna. What do you mean? Luna leaned forward, her eyes bright with excitement. What if this neighborhood had a community center where kids could go after school? What if families who couldn't afford groceries had somewhere to get help? What if there was a scholarship program for local students who wanted to go to college? David's mind started racing. You mean use this money to help the community? Some of it, yes, Luna nodded. Keep enough to live comfortably, but use the rest to make a difference right here where it all started. Turn this corner store into the heart of something bigger. David thought about all the families he'd served over the years. The single mothers working 2 jobs, the elderly people living on small pensions, the bright kids who might never get a chance for higher education because their families couldn't afford it. I could help a lot of people, David said slowly. You already have helped a lot of people, Luna corrected. This would just be continuing what you've always done, but on a bigger scale. Over the next hour, Luna and David talked about possibilities. A scholarship fund for local high school graduates, a food bank for families in need, after-school programs for kids whose parents worked late, maybe even a small medical clinic for people who couldn't afford regular health care. The beauty of it is, Luna said, you won't be doing it alone. Once people see what you're trying to accomplish, others will want to help. That's how kindness works. It spreads. As the afternoon grew late, Luna stood up to leave. I'll be in town for a few more weeks. We can meet every day if you want, and I'll help you plan everything. David stood up too, still holding the life-changing check. Luna, why are you really doing this? The real reason. Luna paused at the door, her hand on the handle. Because 40 years ago, you treated a strange little girl like she mattered. You saw someone who needed kindness, and you gave it freely. Now I want to make sure that same kindness keeps flowing in this neighborhood long after I'm gone. She turned to face him one last time. David, you taught me that the most powerful force in the universe isn't money or fame or power. It's one person caring about another person's happiness. That's what changes the world. David watched through the window as Luna walked away into the evening light. He looked down at the check in his hands, then around at his simple store that had been his whole life. Tomorrow, he would start making phone calls. He would talk to lawyers about setting up foundations, to contractors about building community centers, to educators about scholarship programs. But tonight, he just stood in his store and marveled at how a candy bar given with love had somehow grown into something that would help hundreds of people for years to come. As he turned off the lights and locked the door, David smiled. Luna was right. Kindness really did spread, and sometimes if you were very lucky, you got to see exactly how far your small act of caring had traveled.